Hi, I'm Linda Heinig, and I'm with William Ravis Real Estate, and I'm here today interviewing Brian Skelly with William Ravis Mortgage. And today I thought we'd focus on buyers and many of the questions that the buyers ask. So, hi Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, first of all, I thought, maybe you can help us understand why buyers need to be pre-approved, and are there any costs, and, how often should they update, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think some buyers sometimes hesitate to get pre-approved because maybe they think it's going to be a big deal, or maybe they're just busy and they put it on the back burner and sometimes don't get around to it. But if you're going out looking at a home, especially in the current environment, if you're serious about taking the next step and the home ownership buying process, getting pre-approved is really important. One is just to make sure that you're going to be able to buy the home in the price range you're looking at. Make sure your credit's okay, the income looks good, but also as a way to be able to demonstrate to the sellers that you're, a qualified buyer, especially with everything going on with COVID-19. Sellers don't necessarily want somebody coming and looking through their home and they got to disinfect everything and clean before and after, unless that person's really qualified. And the best way to demonstrate that is with a pre-approval letter.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on a key one that I've been running into lately with some of the other agents who they want a pre-approval before I can bring people into the houses now. So thank you very much for that. What can Ravis Mortgage do for the buyers? How can you help them in comparison to maybe some things that a local bank or other lenders can do?
Sure, absolutely. So William Ravis Mortgage is a decent sized mortgage company, but we're not a bank. So what we do is we're what's called a correspondent lender, which basically means that on most loans, we're going to approve the loans with our own staff. We're going to fund the loans with our money. And then typically after closing, we're going to sell or transfer that loan to one of about 30 different banks that we work with. So the advantage of that model is that it's very helpful, one, in getting a really good interest rate, but also one of the things that the side effects of coronavirus is that a lot of banks have changed their minimum down payments or the minimum credit scores. So if you just went to one particular bank where you have your checking account, you walk in and you get a pre-approval, that could be a little bit risky, because if that particular bank changes their minimum credit score requirements, they only have the products that are available at that bank. The way we do it, because we work with 30 different banks, it's very easy for us to just kind of transition that loan over to go to a different lender depending on the credit score, down payment. We're going to find the best loan program of all the different banks that we work with. And also we don't really do a lot of advertising. So unlike some companies that spend a ton of money on office space and bank branches and Super Bowl ads, we kind of go lean and mean, and because of that, our rates are really good.
Yeah, and I also find that, working with Ravis Mortgage is a lot easier for me as a real estate agent, because I can talk to you very easily, where I find with other lenders, sometimes they're harder to talk to or even reach, and they won't talk to a real estate agent. They'll only talk to the actual buyer.
Yeah,
So.
it's good to work with somebody that's local. If you kind of just call a company that you find on the internet, you might be talking to somebody who's in a call center, on the other side of the country, and they might do a good job. But if things kind of go sideways and the transaction gets difficult, which, that happens sometimes in real estate, somebody that's local, I really have a vested interest in my reputation. And that means I got to get back to people and do a good job and, do all the right things so that I, continue to take care of the customer and get more referrals from wonderful agents like you.
Thank you. And why would somebody want to buy now? What is the basic good reason to buy? Right now, a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs and things like that, but there there has to be some substantial reasons that somebody would buy now.
Sure. So, there's several industry leaders that keep track of what they call affordability of home buying. And affordability of home buying right now is at some of the highest levels that it's been. So what I mean by that is when you look at, the price of homes and the current interest rates, which are very low, close to, historic lows, it's a great time to buy. Also, when you compare it to renting in most local communities, the cost of rents have gone up over the last couple of years. So, if rents are going up and mortgage rates have come down, you got to kind of take a hard look at how much would you spend in rent. I mean, if you rent for the next 10 years, that might be like a couple $100,000 you're going to spend on rent, and you're just not going to have a lot to show for it. Now, I mean, if you're going to move every year or two, then maybe renting makes sense. But if you're prepared to stay in one place for a few years, you can kind of really build up a little bit of something for yourself by owning your own home. And I think that now's a great time to look at that.
Yeah, I find the same thing. I'm finding the rents are getting really high, especially in Connecticut. And, I look at some of the things that people pay. And when I do a lease and I look at the yearly amount that somebody's putting out for a lease, and I think to myself, oh, they should just buy a home, and which I've moved many people over to that, but that was very important.
Absolutely.
So can you tell me about the steps of getting to a closing? I mean, what does a buyer have to go through? I know many buyers, they like start the process and then they get panic mode, like, what am I going to do now?
Sure. So, the good news is, when you buy a home, you're going to have a whole team helping you get across the finish line. So you've got, your mortgage lender, your real estate agent, a home inspector, and an attorney, all working together to tell you what you need to do next. So even if you don't know everything about it, that's okay. You just kind of got to take the first step of contacting somebody like Linda or somebody like myself and saying, like, I want to do this, and we'll guide you through it. But basically the first step is to get pre-approved. So you contact a lender like myself, request to get pre-approved. We're going to ask you, what you do for work and what your income is. We'll do a credit check. Everything looks good. And we give you your pre-approval letter. Then you're ready to go out and shop for homes. It's a good idea to get your documents ready, like your pay stubs and your W-2s. So you've got those ready to go. And then once your offer gets accepted, then we process the loan. So we get those pay stubs and we get those W-2s. We send them in. An underwriter is going to look at those and sign off on them. We'll do an appraisal on the house. We take care of all that. You do your home inspection, make sure there's no major problems with the house. The agent will help you pick out a good home inspector. And eventually you get what's called the clear to close, which means everything is done with the loan and it's ready for closing. At that point, you meet with an attorney and you sign the final paperwork and bring the remainder of any money that you need for your down payment closing costs. And then they give you the key. That's it. You're a homeowner.
That's great.
Buying a house in 60 seconds.
You brought up closing costs, and I'm just wondering, can I roll those into my mortgage, or can I ask a seller to pay my closing costs? I hear a lot of my friends say that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people sometimes don't even think about closing costs. So it is important to talk to, as you're going through the pre-approval process, have a discussion with the mortgage lender, how much those closing costs are going to be and how we're going to pay for those. So you're not necessarily allowed to just add it into the mortgage. So if you're doing, a 5% down or a 3% down loan program, you're going to have to come up with that down payment and closing costs. Now you can do what's called a seller credit, which is fairly common, especially a lot of first-time home buyers will do this. Essentially the way that it works is like, let's say you found a house and you think the sellers are willing to take $300,000 for the house. And let's say the closing costs were $8,000, including all the taxes and insurance and attorney fees and everything. What you could do is you could say, maybe offer them a price of $307,000 and ask for a $7,000 credit. Now, if you do that, the seller is basically going to get the net amount of $300,000 that they want. And then that way, if you have $7,000 coming to you in the form of that seller credit, and the actual closing costs are 8,000, then instead of having to pay the full 8, you only have to pay 1,000 because that's the difference between the actual closing costs and seller credit. So that can be very helpful for people that maybe don't have the money for the closing costs and the down payment, but you do need to anticipate that that's what you want to do and put that in the offer. And, you know, that's important.
And then it has to appraise at that price, so.
It's got to appraise at
That would
that
be
price.
good.
And also we are seeing a lot more multiple offers. So, you know, if you're in a situation where, you know, there's 4 people bidding on a house and you can pay your own closing costs and you have the money to do that, you might not want to ask for the seller credit just to try and make yourself look a little bit better than, you know, the other person who's bidding on the house. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I as an agent have run into that a few times myself, so that was a very good point. Well, Brian, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I hope the buyers out there also appreciate it, and looking forward to doing some others with you in the future.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.